In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be reviewing the Mercato, we'll be predicting the Serie A, we'll be previewing the Sampdoria game, this week's Moratti, Moggi and Frog, and much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, on StudioInter.com. Bentornati, benvenuti to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host Nima Tavallaey, wishing you welcome back from this international break. From a week when we had no Serie A football, it was an international break, but we had a Mercato close, and these are the teams. The table has been set, the chess table has been set, and now we have to see. Now the fun begins. The actual games begin, and we have to see how Inter do, if Inter can get that second star or not. But before we get to all of that, I'd like to introduce my panelist. He's the SempreInter.com preview writer, Mr. Mohamed Nassar. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Good as usual. Strange to be recording on a Sunday night rather than a Monday night, but otherwise all is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it is. I thought we'd do it a little bit earlier this week because we do play Sampdoria, but we're going to talk about that as well. We play Sampdoria on I think it's a lunch match as well, if I'm not mistaken. But no, it is. It's a lunch match on next Sunday. Against Sampdoria. But before we get to that, let me introduce the remaining members of the panel. He's making his season debut on Studio Inter. He used to write for SempreInter, used to be the chief news editor. Now he's over on the Daily Mail, amongst others. Welcome back, Mr. Will Beckman. How are you?
Hello. Yes, good to be back. I'm really, really pleased that I've made my season debut on the episode where we make our inevitably dreadful season predictions. Come back just in time to make a fool of myself. So,
dreadful unless you're Mo. Mo makes the good predictions. The rest of us, I don't know.
Yeah,
we just copy his homework, don't we?
Yep.
Okay. No, I have listened to the first few episodes of the season. Very well done, and lots of good points made, and hopefully we can make some more today. Hopefully.
Oh, well, I hope so. We are joined by our man in Dallas. He's a sports editor on D Magazine. Welcome, Mike, the Reverend Piellucci.
Good to be back as well. Good to be joining Will in season debut, and apparently both of us getting new jobs, and hopefully both of us not dragging down the quality shows that you and Mo have been putting out with Mike and Alex Dotto so far.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think I'm sure we'll be fine. But I mean, let's get into it. The Mercato closed. It was a very dramatic summer for Inter and Inter fans. Not the kind of summer you'd expect when you've won the title. But it's Italy. It's Inter, and Inter are what they are, and it is what it is. But all things considered, I thought what we do is we'd give ratings to the Mercato and motivate why, and get a little discussion going before we predict the Serie A. So I'm going to start with you, Mo. I want to get your rating, and I want to know why. Why you give the rating.
It's a very difficult season to give a rating on, especially coming off the back of last season, where or the last couple of seasons, where Inter did extremely well, bringing in big names, Lukaku, Barella, Hakimi, and the foundations of this new generation were being built. So, of course, it's not as great as those previous seasons, but at the same time, I think if you don't analyze the season or the transfer season in a vacuum and look at it as part of the overall constraints, economic and otherwise, that the management were facing, I wouldn't be able to rate it any lower than 8.5. So I think, objectively speaking, this has got to be one of the best Mercatos, constraints or otherwise, that we've seen since the treble, since the treble season. So in over a decade, we've had a fantastic mercato in terms of incoming players, in terms of letting go of deadwood and letting go of heavy wages. So I think in that sort of sense, the mercato's been great. The only issue has been that, a minor footnote has been that the incoming players have come to replace star players, not just to build on and increase the depth of the side. So that is my only criticism. But I've alluded to this when we had James Horncastle and Gab Marcotti the last couple of weeks. Personally, I think standing here looking at the season in front of us, still to be played, I think with this squad and this manager, I'm probably more optimistic today compared to the same time last year. Not knowing what I know now about the squad last year and how the season transpired. Knowing all things equal, where we are today on the 5th of September versus where we were on the 5th of September, where I still believe that Inter would win the Scudetto, so on and so forth. I'm more optimistic of this squad's chances in the Serie A. And again, it's got to do with an amazing transfer season, and it's also got to do with, comparatively poorer transfer seasons by our direct rivals. So yes, I think an 8.5 for me is generous, but I'm Mr. Positivity, so that's what I'm going to give.
Fair enough. Mike, where are you on this? On the classic 1 to 10 rating, where are you and why?
I'm with Mr. Positivity on this. I think Mo took the words out of my mouth, and this is how I reviewed it with this show last year. You have to look at the constraints that Beppe Marotta and Piero Ausilio are under, right? What are you working with? Well, if Beppe Marotta and Piero Ausilio had the choice, they certainly would not be without Antonio Conte. They certainly would not have sold Achraf Hakimi. They certainly would not have sold Romelu Lukaku. Those were decisions bigger than them. Those were on account of constraints bigger than them, on account of economic forces bigger than them. All you could judge them on is what they were able to do with what they were given. And if you really break it down, I mean, every move they made was very, very impressive to me, right? Edin Dzeko on a free, essentially, right? I guess €1.5 million if and when Inter make the Champions League. I can't see a scenario in which they don't make the Champions League. A guy who has a lot left to offer, I think has something in the tank for at least this year, if not 2 years. Love that move. Denzel Dumfries for the price that they paid for him, which is essentially €12.5 million plus 2.5 bonuses. That's a guy who starts for the Netherlands. That's one of the most exciting younger wingbacks in Europe. They got him on a great deal. Joaquin Correa as a big signing to come in and not replace Lukaku like for like, but be a quality player in the attack. Already showing his quality, has shown at Lazio that he is a difference maker, starts for Argentina, a very talented guy. We could sit here and debate, should they've gotten Andrea Belotti, should they've gotten Correa? The bottom line is they added a very talented player. They let, when Lukaku left, they didn't come away from this with empty-handed, And then a move that I consider a transfer in a lot of ways is getting Federico DiMarco back on, off of loan to come in. I think he's going to be starting at mid-season, a left wing back. I don't know how high the ultimate ceiling is. I think he could be, at worst, though, I think a quality player and a useful starter. You look at that and you look at how little they spent because they had so little to work with compared to what they sold. They just did remarkable work. And it's the same thing as last year when, Hakimi was the only big signing they brought in, but what did they have to work with? This time around, the mandate was sell 2 big-time star players, maximize the profits, and it should be worth noting that they sold Achraf Hakimi and Romelu Lukaku for considerably more than what they bought them for. And they reinvested in some players who I think 2 of them will be around for a while, and one of them, and then Dzeko, is an incredible piece of business. So I can't not be optimistic and excited for how they handle the market. Whether that means another Scudetto, I don't know, but they did the best they could with the constraints they were under, and I think that deserves a very generous rating. So I'm going 8.5 as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a fair shout. Will, are you equally as positive as the previous 2 gentlemen, or are you a little bit more down to earth?
Well, I mean, it's, as Mo said, it's really, really difficult to give a flat rating to this transfer. I mean, it's always difficult because you've got lots of different elements. You've got outgoings, incomings, the circumstance in which the deals were made. But it's even harder, I think, on this instance, because you've got to work out. I mean, are we grading the Marotta and Auxilia? Are we grading Suning? Are we grading everything as a whole? I mean, it's very complex, and I don't think there's any one number that can really sort of satisfactorily explain what's happened over the last few months. But I've done it as a rating for Suning, a rating for Marotta and Auxilia, and then taken the average of that, which is why mine is lower, because I don't think the directors could really have done much more given the situation they were in. I mean, they were told pretty much the day after Inter won the league that they were going to have this really difficult challenge to get in an 80 million profit, or whatever it was, and reduce the wage bill by 15-20%. So if we're looking exclusively at them, to basically keep the team roughly as competitive as it was at the end of last season with those constraints is a incredible achievement. I mean, I don't think it would be reasonable to criticize them really for anything. That the signings they've made make sense. They're either players who've got potential to improve or know the league. They all kind of make sense. There's a player that Inzaghi wanted, which is good, given that Lukaku wasn't expected to leave. So signing Correa sort of reinforces his position, which was probably necessary. So it's very, very difficult to give an overall rating. But in terms of signings, I think it's a job well done. We've got direct replacements for Lukaku, Hakimi, and Eriksen. Di Marco in for Young is pretty good. That's a bit of a regeneration, and I mean, potentially just a better player in that position. I really like Dumfries as a signing. It's kind of signing we should be making. He's young, but he's already kind of established. He's got room for improvement. He's on a reasonable salary. He's got resale value if we end up in a position where we need to sell him. So the signings are all pretty positive. In an ideal world, we would have found a different goalkeeper to replace Handanovic, but obviously at the moment that's not really realistic. Sales are pretty good as well. Lazio has gone. Nainggolan and Jean-Marie have gone completely, albeit we didn't get fees for them. So most of the deadwood has been shifted. Obviously, one of the small upsides of selling Hakimi and Lukaku is that we didn't have to sacrifice youngsters. So the likes of Di Marco, Agume, Van Huysden, these players are still on our books and could become useful in future years. So that's all good. But look, the bottom line is we were the champions of Italy and we lost the coach, the best striker, the star wing back of the league, and none of the replacements are stronger. So I'm saying staying moderate in my praise of this window. I've rated it 6 because that's the average between a 4 and an 8, essentially, which is how I've split it up. But the number is kind of arbitrary. I think what I am feeling positive. I think that's the thing that I would say, and I was not expecting to feel this positive when the summer started, and particularly, well, not even when the summer started. 4 weeks ago, when Lukaku was sold, I was thinking this team might not even make the top 4. It was that bleak in my head. Because the mood was awful. I was worried about what the directors might do as a result of having to sell Lukaku. Would they stay? How would the team react? And the signs we've had since then have all been very good. So, my rating is 6 for the reasons I've just explained. But, as Mo said, strangely, I almost feel more optimistic this season than I did in previous seasons. And if you'd said that sort of 2 or 3 months ago, I would have thought you were absolutely mad. So I'm overall feeling positive.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that last part is something I think everyone would agree with. In terms of it's been wild, and I conti si fanno alla fine. The accounts are settled at the end, and the end when the accounts were settled. It's a team that's better suited to how Simone Inzaghi wants to play. I think the way I look at it is I give 2 ratings, one for players in, one for players out, and then the add them together and divide by 2, and that's the one you get. And players in, I give 8, because if you look at what was available out there when Hakimi left, Marotta played it really cool. He wanted Denzel Dumfries from the get-go. Hector Bellerin was a backup. Naita Hernandez was a backup. I think for everything, especially what Mike said about Denzel Dumfries is a very exciting player. We'll have to wait and see, but if he can succeed in the league, it's a very different league to the Dutch league. Serie A, it's much more tactical, it's much more closed off. You have to be much more intelligent. But to me, what I see when I see, we have to remember that Denzel Dumfries is a captain of PSV. That means he's a leader and he's a professional. He's not, this is a guy that comes in and he wants to do well here. He's fully motivated, he's fully concentrated, and that's really reassuring and encouraging. And as for Correa, technically, if not the best player in the Serie A, certainly top three, technically gifted as in terms of technically, how gifted he is technically, but the problem has been goals and assists. Now he started off absolutely brilliantly, so there's not much to comment on there. We'll just have to wait and see. I think Edin Dzeko, my only concern is Edin Dzeko at 35. I don't doubt his quality, I doubt his quantity, meaning can he, Inter don't have a backup to him, and it's clear that he's the kind of player that they're going to start in, week out. And I think when you're building a team around a 35-year-old like that's a risk. But having said that, this means that Lautaro Martinez is the biggest star of this team. He's the one that they're going to build the project around. He's going to extend his contract. They're also going to extend a contract of Brozovic, De Vrij, Skriniar, and Barella, which is in this incredibly difficult climate a very, very impressive thing they've done. They've also done it with Bastoni. So I, as a whole, all players coming in, I have to give it an 8. As for players going out, I can't give that more than a 6. Because 150 million euros for Lukaku is what I expect to get for a player of Lukaku's caliber. 70, 80 million for Hakimi is what I expect to get for a player of Hakimi's caliber. If you want to get a higher rating, you have to be able to cash in on the Lazaros, which they didn't. You have to be able to cash in on João Mario, which they absolutely didn't, and in fact, might end up being sued by, or are being sued by Sporting to see if they violated that contract, preventing Inter to sell him to, let him go to a Portuguese club for 5 years without paying a 30 million euro fine. We'll have to wait and see what that happens. I doubt anything will come out of it because the contract was terminated. But we'll have to wait and see. Then you have Raja Nainggolan, same thing there, the mutual termination. Zinho van Heusden, I think, he's a player in more than a player out. They had a deal with Standard. They signed him. He's the most expensive signing they did this summer because Joaquin Correa is on a loan with an option which will become an obligation in early 2021. And Çalhanoğlu free transfer. They had to do that after what happened with Eriksson. Di Marco, good signing in as well. Perisic and Inter are quite clear that they're going to part ways. This is the last year. Same thing with Vecino. So they've not managed to sell any players. Now it is it's a difficult mercato to do that in, given the financial constraints that Inter find themselves in, and everyone finds themselves in. There's no money going about except for at the very top with City and Man United, City, PSG, etc. But Premier League clubs and PSG. So they have the money and therefore, you don't see a lot of movement at other levels. But having said that, so I can't give them more than a 6 for players out. So overall it's a 7. But I really want to build on that point that Will, Mike, and Mo made, and that is I am far more positive and far more excited going into this season than I was going into last season. And the reason for that is because this is a different Inter. I think I would have absolutely loved for this to be in a different situation where Antonio Conte stayed and Inter had signed Rodrigo de Paul and then kept the team together and marched on to dominate the Serie A and maybe even go far in the Champions League. Because I think, and I've said this on this podcast throughout, last season and this spring, that that football that Inter played from February onwards would have caused every team in Europe all sorts of problems. And I think they could have gone really, really far with that Rodrigo de Paul added on that. But it's a new project. But it's a new project based on players that have now, in 2 years, won the league in record-breaking fashion, and they've also been in the final of a European Cup. This is not they've made that change mentally, and they've got a coach who is a master at getting the best out of everything available to him. He did that for 5.5 years at Lazio. Whether they were, whether it was developing talent like Milinkovic Savic, whether it was getting players who had reached an age where they had never really fulfilled their potential, like Luis Alberto, or players whose careers had stagnated a little bit and needed to be kick-started, like Ciro Immobiles and Lucas Leiva, and other players, Acerbi, etc. Lazzari. I mean, he knows how to get the best of what he's got, and he's got a better squad at Inter than he has ever had at Lazio, and overall at least. And I think that's what makes me really positive. He's a much more direct coach. He's much more clearer in his communication, and that's something that we know, not just based on the 5 years he was at Lazio, but also based on what Inter players say. When Milan Skriniar says that Simone Inzaghi is a human and he sees you as a human, and I think that must be, but he sees them, he says he sees you as a human, and he looks, he treats you with respect. And yes, he wants professionalism and he demands professionalism, but he doesn't hammer them into the ground like Conte did, and he's not crazy like Spalletti was. And conflict seeking. He's a much more calm, and that's what Inter need. Inter's coach needs to be disciplined, but also needs to be the one that unites the squad and unites the club and doesn't rock the boat. And Simone Inzaghi is just that. He plays a much more direct football, much more pressing higher up the pitch. He's not a tactical genius by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think you have to be in order to win titles, or I don't think that can be the bar that you have to have for a good coach. He is, in my opinion, I've always, anyone who followed me on social media knows that I think that he is the next Italian super coach, no doubt about that. And I think this is his chance of a lifetime. I'm very happy he's at Inter. I think he's got a squad that suits him to a T, and I think Inter are going to have a lot of success under him. I really do. But speaking, going on that point, success. I mean, what are we predicting for Inter this season, and what are we thinking constitutes success? For me, I think, given how the other teams look, Inter should win the Serie A. There's no doubt in my mind. They're the favorites, and I don't want it to run away from that. I think Inter should also, given the squad and everything, it should also go through to the second round of the Champions League. I think Inter should get to at least the final of the Coppa Italia, and I think they should win the Supercoppa. That's what I want to see. For me to see this season as a success, I want to see development on several fronts and growth on several fronts. What about you, Mo? What would constitute success for you going into the season before we predict the season?
Yeah, I think success for the season is winning the Scudetto and making a nice deep run into the Champions League. I honestly don't care much for the Supercoppa or the Coppa Italia. We've spoken about this, quite controversially last season. Our opinions about the Coppa Italia. So I think it's mainly a distraction. But I think I would also consider the season a success if, say, for example, Atalanta come guns blazing and win the Scudetto, and Inter are there fighting with them, every step of the way. Because I don't think the season it's a much more finely balanced top 3-4 than it has ever been in the Serie A, at least in recent memory. So while I think Inter will win the Scudetto, I also wouldn't begrudge Inzaghi the label of a successful season if he does continue comprehensively competing for the Scudetto up to the last game and losing it to someone, as long as that someone is neither Juventus nor Milan. I think if we finish below these two clowns, then we're in bad shape, and it's not a successful season. So compete for the Scudetto, finish ahead of Juventus and Milan, and do a deep run in the Champions League to show that you're really moving towards something impressive. But of course, I still think that doesn't mean that I'm running away from my prediction of Inter winning the Scudetto. I just think that I'll probably be a little bit more accepting of a result that's not a win from the end of the season.
Okay. What about you, Mike? Where are you on this?
I think I'm probably between the two of you. I definitely agree. The biggest thing that I'm going to lose my mind if it doesn't happen is they've got to get out of the damn group stage of the Champions League. Enough is enough. It should have done it the last 2 years. This group is almost identical to what they had last year. They and Real Madrid are levels above the other two teams in this group. You could very easily sell me that Inter is a better team than Real Madrid. Get out of the Champions League group stage. As far as whether they win the title or not, I mean, ultimately, look, this has been a summer of change, and this has been a summer of overhaul. And I think it's always a lot to expect a new manager to come in and just say, all right, pick up where the last guy left off. You need to win the league or you have failed. That worked for Juventus for a while, but the rest of the league was so watered down compared to where Juve was for that 9-year run some of those times that, yeah, you could plug in an Allegri, or even towards the end when they plugged in Saudi, who didn't even really fit the squad that well. You could still do that and it would work because there was that much of a talent gap. That isn't the case here. I don't think Inter have a clearly better squad than everyone else. I think they're in the top 2 or 3. They very well might have the best squad, but there isn't a massive gap the way that there was last year now that Lukaku's not here. So to sit here and say it is a failure if they don't win the league when Simone Inzaghi has come in, when the best player in the league and the heartbeat of this club, Lukaku, is no longer here, I don't feel comfortable with that. To me, and we'll get to this in predictions, I think there's a group of 3 that you could sell me on winning the league. It's Inter, it's Juventus, and it's Atalanta. I'm a Milan skeptic in a lot of ways, and we'll get to that. But I can't figure out which of these 3 teams will win the league. I think Inter absolutely can, and I wouldn't be shocked if they do. I also wouldn't be shocked if if they're in 3rd place and it's close. So what do I think is a good year? I think get out of the Champions League group stage. I think, like Mo said, be in the Scudetto race until the end. Hell, I'd like to see a Coppa Italia win. I'm pro Coppa Italia. I'd like to have that badge back on the shirt someday. So that's kind of where I'm at with this.
Fair enough. Will, what about you?
It's really difficult because on the one hand, I look at Inter's competitors and think that there's no reason that Inter can't finish ahead of all of them, despite all the problems that we've had this summer. But then on the other hand, I completely agree with what Mike says about expecting a new coach to win the league at a new club in his first season, particularly when it's his first experience at a certain level of club. So the league is very hard to read, but I think I wouldn't say it's a failure if Inter don't win the league, because I think there's a middle ground between success and failure. But I think, given the landscape at the moment, given that nobody really has strengthened, and in some cases you could say teams have got weaker, I think if Inter don't win the league, the year after they won the league so convincingly, I don't think you can say it's a success. I don't feel entirely comfortable saying that, but normally I wouldn't demand that of a new coach who's just lost the team's 2 best players, and I'm not demanding it now, but I do think that there will be a degree of underachievement if Inter finish behind any of those teams, given what we've seen in the first 2 games of the season. So I would say if we don't win the league, it's not a fully successful season. Obviously, it depends how you don't win the league. If you finish 4th on the final day, and if you finish 2nd on the final day battling with a great Juventus team, then obviously there's a difference. So you can't really judge these things in advance. But I would say, generally, for it to be a great season, Inter need to win the league again because of the competition that's there and because of the quality of the squad that Marotta and Rosilli have somehow put together for this season. Having said that, I agree with Mike. My real interest, at least for the first half of the season, is this Champions League group, because if Inter don't get out that group again, I will forgive that much less than in the previous 3 seasons, because this team is as strong as any of the teams that have gone before it, and they're in a group that's probably weaker than any of the groups that we've been in previous seasons. So, going back to that sort of that kind of grey area between success and failure. If, for instance, we finished 2nd in the league, but we reached the quarterfinals of the Champions League, I think that's a successful season potentially, because then there's an overall sense of kind of intangible sense of growth, even if you haven't necessarily won a big trophy. So I think it's kind of the success threshold is kind of balanced between those two competitions. I don't really mind much about the Supercoppa. That's one match. And the Coppa d'Italia would have been more important last season when we were trying to end this trophy drought. Now that we've ended it with a much bigger trophy, I don't think that's going to tip the balance either way, really. I think it's going to be the sum of Serie A and Champions League that is the barometer of success. So I would say it's a successful season if Inter either win the league or make a good run in the Champions League, and I mean quarterfinals. So if one of those two things happens, I think I'm going to be relatively pleased with how it's gone. But other than that, I think it's hard to give a hard and fast sort of statement on that at the moment, because there's a lot of intangibles. If we see great progress, if we're cheated out of the league for somehow, it's hard to say. But I do think this team probably should win the league again. I will say that. So if they don't, then I won't be celebrating what we've achieved, I think, at the end of the season. Let's put it like that.
Can I jump in real quick with
go.
branching off Will said, because I think he made a good point about not just Inzaghi being new, but this being his first time at this level. If there is a counterpoint to what I said about why why it's a lot to put on a new manager to win, if as far as clubs that are not the quote unquote big clubs in Italy, but are that second tier, Lazio being one of them, I don't know if there's a better place that Simone Inzaghi could prepare for what he's walking into at Inter than being at Lazio, right? I mean, the purse strings have been pinched for years there. He was used to working with minimal resources. He didn't complain. He played good soldier. And just that, I mean, between just the way Lotito operates, there's a lot of, if there's a club that's Pazza outside of Inter in Serie A among the upper crust, Lazio is certainly among those clubs. It's a wild environment that he didn't have a lot of resources in. So he knows what he's getting into. There isn't going to be some blow up in mid-November about why didn't you buy me this, the way that Conte inevitably would do. I think he can handle choppy waters, and that's so massive here, right? I mean, yeah, the squad is acclimated towards his formation. That's a big part of why Inter hired him. But if this is Inter are hardly in crisis, but this is upheaval, the likes which you don't typically see from a team winning the league, a team that won the league with more domestic points than any team in Europe last year in their league. To go from that to where this club is right now, that's a lot, and you need someone who can roll with the punches, and Inzaghi can absolutely do that. So. To you guys' point that, hey, and I think Will makes a very good point that inevitably, if you don't win the league after you've won by as much as you did last year and some of your competition didn't improve either, it's considered a disappointment. Well, that this manager can handle, I think, psychologically what's being asked of him better than most other new managers could. And that's a major reason for optimism here.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Let's go to our predictions, and I'm not gonna. I don't think you can run away from it, because I think the spine of the team is still there. I think the Handanovic issue is an issue. We all know it. We all see it. They will address it. They will have to address it. But this summer, there were other more pressing issues from what we're hearing. Andre Onana is basically going to sign for Inter in January on a free transfer and join next June. So, which is a typical kind of thing that that Beppe Marotta does when he sees an opening to sign a player on a free transfer. I'd watch out. I'd watch out. I'd follow and watch what happens to Frank Kessie and Romagnoli as well, because it seems. We know that Inter have been interested in Kessie for a long time, and I'm sure that they will absolutely be igniting their engines looking into Milan for him, and even, I think even maybe Alessio Romagnoli, if I'm perfectly honest, because as a free transfer goes, those are decent signings for a Serie A team, and Inter will be looking to replace Kolarov and Ranocchia and D'Ambrosio next summer, for sure. So we'll have to watch that. We'll have to watch out and see what happens there. And I think also the Insigne situation, I wouldn't underestimate that either. So I think there's going to be a lot of free transfers moving forward until football recovers. but it'll take a few years for the non-Premier League and PSG sides to recover financially. We'll see. But having said that, I think Inter are going to win the league. I don't want to run away from it. I think Inter. I mean, I'm not demanding a Scudetto, but I feel I kind of am, because I think Juventus are not I think they're weaker than they were last season. I think all the teams are weaker than they were last season, except for maybe Atalanta, but Roma, who have strengthened significantly. But I don't think they can win. I think you can say that Atalanta, you can make a case for them to win. And I think if there is going to be a surprise winner this season, it will be this year when most teams haven't been able to strengthen. But I still think it will be, I think Roma will be up there, but I don't think they'll win the league. I think it's going to be tight. So I have Inter as my number one, and then I have. So now let's just go around like that. I mean, do we all have Inter as winning the Serie A, Mo?
Come on, man. Is this a question to ask me? I've had Inter winning the Serie A, for a while now. I think right from the start, I think, Inter as winners. My prediction, locked in.
Fair enough. What about you, Mike?
Not necessarily. I keep going back and forth. You said every squad has gotten weaker except possibly Atalanta. I think Atalanta's better than last year. I mean, they brought in the guy who was maybe the best keeper in Serie A last year, besides Donnarumma, and Juan Musso. A year ago, I know everybody's worried about Christian Romero leaving. A year ago, if you asked people who's the better depth defender at Juventus, Mera Demiral or Romero, most people are saying Demiral. They get Demiral. I love the midfielder they brought in from the Dutch league, whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce because I'm going to butcher it. But most of all, they have continuity, right? Every other team in my top four, which for me it's these three in Napoli, but you can make a case for Mourinho also, right? They all have new managers. They all have new cultures to adapt to. Yeah, Allegri's back at Juventus, but it's been 2 years and there's a lot of change there. Atalanta have continuity with Gasperini. They have upgraded in a couple of areas. The big thing for me was, are they going to get a holding midfielder? And they did that with a player who has a ton of promise. I could see them winning the league. I could see Inter winning the league for everything we're talking about. And look, I don't want to think that Juventus can win the league, but I think Locatelli is going to be the best midfielder they've had in quite some time. And Allegri is going to be an enormous coaching upgrade. You could sell me on any of these three. My head says that Atalanta just don't have the top end talent, and I am utterly convinced. I can't believe more people aren't talking about the center back depth or lack thereof now at Juventus, depending on Chiellini and Bonucci to make it through the season unscathed, because that's what needs to happen for them to win. I can't see it, not at their ages, So I could see the defense falling apart, to say nothing of who is replacing Ronaldo's goals. I think they're going to depend a ton on Dybala, and that's risky. My head says Inter will win the league. But this time last year, I picked Juventus, and it successfully jinxed them, and I'm superstitious. So we're going to say Atalanta 1 and Juventus 2 and Inter 3, just to make sure that some good vibes come our way, and you guys could predict us to actually win the league.
Fair enough. Will?
Yeah, I'm not working with sort of ulterior motives in my prediction here, like some of us. I've just sort of predicted what I think is going to happen. If you'd said to me 3 months ago that in our season prediction podcast I was going to be putting Inter first, I would have sent for a straitjacket. I mean, I can't quite believe the way that I've done a 360 on our prospects for this season. But yes, I do have Inter in first place, Nima.
180, not 360. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. When you do a 360, you go the whole way around.
But here's the thing, though.
I did a 360.
Team got decimated, Will probably thought we were going to win, then got decimated to go 180, and now he's back the other way.
Okay, got it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
I got you. And it's good that you're not picking like I am, because you're not a crazy person like I am. So
yeah. Wow, that was a reflex save worthy of Handanovic's best years from me.
No, but seriously, it's my biggest pet peeve when people say they do a 360 when they mean 180. It's like when you do a 360, you do an entire
No, but actually thinking about it, it's probably true that I have done a 360, because it's probably what happened, what Mike described.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I mean, if there were no sales and they didn't buy anybody, I remember Nima's preferred scenario, which I was in favor of too, is just don't sell anybody and just bring back DeMarco. I'm thinking we're winning the league for sure, right? So I circa May, what was it? 3 days after the title's when everything explodes. So the 48 hours after the title, I'm thinking we're winning easily, no sweat, the same way that we all were.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. But I mean, let's quickly. I mean, I'm just going to run through who I think is how I think the top places. I think Inter are going to win. I think Atalanta are finishing second, Juve third, Milan fourth, Roma fifth, Napoli sixth, Lazio seventh, Fiorentina eighth. I think Venezia, Spezia, and Hellas Verona are being relegated. I have Victor Osimhen as capocannoniere. I have Inter winning the Coppa Italia. I have Juve winning the Supercoppa. So just quickly going around the table, starting with you, Mo. What are your predictions? 1 to 8. Who will go down? Coppa Italia, Capocannoniere, Supercoppa, etc.
Okay, so 1 to 8 for me is Inter, Napoli. I think, not Inter, Napoli. Juve, Atalanta, top 4, and then it's Milan, Roma, 6. And then it's Lazio, and I guess Fiorentina. I didn't think the 7 and 8 place, but yeah, sure. Relegation, I'll just take yours. You said Spezia, Venezia, and
Hellas Verona, because it depends on when Eusebio Di Francesco gets sacked. If he gets sacked before Christmas, they have a chance. If not, they're going down.
No. Yeah. I think it's a solid call. Capocannoniere is a tough one. I don't know who would stand out today. Immobile again. I think Immobile under Sarri maybe. He's already got his scoring boots on. So Immobile under Sarri. Coppa Italia. Again, I don't care. I would like for Atalanta to win a title. I think the Gasperini project deserves the title, and I think we're going to win the Supercoppa. So that's my role.
Fair enough. Mike, where are you on?
Yeah, so you already heard my top 3 that I only marginally take fully seriously. And Atalanta, Juve, and Inter. It may actually be reversed. I'm a crazy person. This club has just robbed me of all of my faculties. I do have Napoli 4th. Milan is 5th, and I'm just going to pause to say I don't get the Milan thing. I don't get it. They lost. Mike Maignan is a really good keeper. So it's not a disaster that Donnarumma has left. But Donnarumma might be the best keeper in the world. So you're worse in net. Çalhanoğlu leaves on a free. And, of course, I forget to mention him earlier in the podcast, but I like that move for Inter. Their 2 best players are their 2 center mids who happen to be gone for a month in the African Cup of Nations. They are their main reinforcement is a striker in his mid-30s to back up a striker in his late 30s. And Stefano Pioli if you look at the top 4 teams that I have here, right? Inter, Atalanta, Juve, Napoli. Stefano Pioli is a worse manager than all 4 of those managers. I don't think Milan's squad is better than any of those 4 teams. They're going to have a contract saga with Kessié and Romagnoli hanging over them. I don't get it. I can't grasp how there is so much expectation that this team is a clear top 4 team. And I have Roma in 6th. Lazio is 7th. I'm going to say Sassuolo 8th with a lot of high-powered, fun attacking with Berardi and Scamacca and Raspadori. Hopefully future Inter striker Raspadori. Let's just put that out there in the universe. I'm going to agree on the relegation teams, which makes me sad only because I have a huge soft spot for Venezia. Best shirts in the league. Best city in the world, in my opinion. Let's say Inter win the Supercoppa. I'm going to have Duvan Zapata winning Capocannoniere, in keeping with my whole Atalanta's winning the league thing that I only 45% believe. And Coppa Italia, let's go with Napoli.
Okay. Will?
So what happened was a few days ago, I knew that we were going to be doing these predictions, and I knew this was going to be a difficult one, but for all the reasons that we've said, that there's so much unpredictability at the top, perhaps more than ever. So I made my predictions then and locked them in. And what's happened in the last 10 minutes that I've absolutely changed everything based on what you've all been saying. So I've realised some good points have been made in both directions. So I've shuffled this around a lot, but I'm now fairly happy with what I've got. So I've got Inter winning the league. That stayed the same. I've got Juventus in 2nd. That stayed the same. Atalanta are 3rd now. Napoli are 4th because Spalletti is a Champions League qualification wizard. Milan are 5th. Roma are 6th. and Lazio and Sassuolo are 7th and 8th. I've got Duvan Zapata as the capocannoniere because I struggle for that, but I think he could be in the Atalanta team, could be a good bet. Going down, Venezia, Spezia and Salernitana. I don't think Frag Ribery is enough to save them. I think they've got one of the worst squads I've ever seen in the top flight. I've got Milan to win the Coppa Italia because it's, picking a team basically, and they've won it in a while. And I've got Juventus to win the Supercoppa, and that is slightly, superstitious because obviously I'm just sort of foreseeing some kind of controversial defeat, to put it diplomatically. So I'll say Juventus win the Supercoppa.
So what did you change, Phil? Where were you at before we start talking?
Oh, I've moved Milan down and Atalanta up basically because you said you said good things, Mike. So, but then I also changed other things as well. So that's what I've got now. That's what matters. I've considered my predictions very, very carefully and completely changed them in the course of 5 minutes. So, yeah. I mean, if obviously if I get them all wrong, I can just say, well, I originally had the right league table. So, I've got an insurance.
Blame me. Just blame me. I swayed you on this. It's my fault.
No, you did. I mean, I honestly forgot Atalanta had signed Juan Musa. Oh God. Okay.
Oh my. If Inter by some act of God had signed Juan Musa, I would think we'd win the league by 15 points.
Yeah.
That's how big of a gap I think there is between him and what Samir is now.
I think because that happened a while ago. Yeah. And also I like Giroud, but you're right about Milan. They've actually just got weaker. So anyway, I'm signing these predictions with my own signature, not yours. So, I'm happy with them now.
Well, okay. Well, that's fair enough. We do play Sampdoria this weekend. We play them the following weekend on Sunday. It's a lunch match game, 12:30 kickoff CET. It's a game where it feels like the last days of the Mercato, it felt like Sampdoria were basically, because they were playing Inter, they were basically signing everyone under the sun to strengthen going into that game. Like basically assembling, I saw someone tweet out that Ferrero's basically assembling the Avengers because he's playing Inter next. But it is what it is. But no, it's going to be interesting because there is, the Gagliardini is fully recovered. Alexis Sanchez, we don't know. I don't think he will be recovering in time for that. Edin Dzeko, Lautaro, Joaquin Correa, all of them are on international duty. So I'm a little bit worried about this game. And I mean, and also Denzel Dumfries, Skriniar. We have a lot of players on international duty, and they play. Most of them play pretty closely to that Sunday. And by the time everyone listens to this, you will also have been made aware of the absolute clown cart show that has been happening in Brazil, between Brazil and Argentina. So I think Lautaro and Joaquin Correa will be a little bit more rested, but they still have to get back to Europe from South America and not be jet lagged. I'm worried here. I'm really worried, and it's Sampdoria are a little bit of a, especially away. Sampdoria are a little bit of a bogey team. Remember, we lost last season against them away. Alexis Sanchez missed a penalty, if I'm not mistaken, and that was kind of the kickstart of Inter going on that crazy run. I'm thinking 1-1 draw here. I think Satriano will start. I think Satriano will score, but I think this is going to end in a 1-1 draw. It's going to be tight and difficult. What about you, Mo?
Yeah, this is one where I have to, like you, think that it's not going to be all fun and games. I think for sure it's going to be a difficult game, considering the tough week and workload on all our internationals. But I also think that Inter do possess the quality to win. So I think it'll be a difficult 2-1 where, for example, Vidal goal in the 80th, or maybe Vidal won't play because he was on Chile international duty. But Gagliardini goal in the 88th minute or something, just to scrape the 3 points by the skin of our teeth. I think ultimately we'll win, but we'll suffer a lot. It will not be a pretty game for Interisti to watch.
Fair enough. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree that this is not going to be a clean sheet. I basically use this match to talk about the two things that I think will really determine whether they win the league, which is the two players. One is just the elephant in the room is Samir. I can't see. I mean, this is, Sampdoria is scrappy. They have the old dude striker crew with Quagliarella and Caputo now. It feels like they are going to put some shots on net, and just week in, week out, how much can you trust Samir Handanovic at this point? It was rough last year. It was a white knuckle ride. Inter in an ideal world would have had the money to replace him. Now they don't. This feels like one of those matches that it should be an Inter win, and it might be a draw. And you could afford a few of those during the year when you drop some points that you should have. But how many times, if this is a Samir error, whether it happens this week or in a couple weeks, there will be one. How many of those can they weather, right? That's going to be one of the defining questions of this team. And then the other aspect is, I don't know who they're going to start, right? There's been a lot of talk in the papers that they might juggle the lineup. But so much of this year really depends on Lautaro. All right. It is Lautaro's being positioned both economically and symbolically as the face of this club now, but he needs technically to be that guy. How many times last year when things were rough did Lukaku drag this team by the scruff of the neck and score a goal when he needed to, right? That's not Lautaro. Lautaro runs hot and cold. There are times when he looks like the best player on the pitch, and there are times when he just looks lost. He always works, but we can't have the Lautaro Martinez anymore of he'll wind up with 18 goals at the end of the year and he's worked hard, and some matches he's great and some matches he disappears. This needs to be 20 to 25 goals with Lautaro, which I think is doable considering he'll take all the penalties that Lukaku had. And there needs to be some moments where if this is, one of those matches where Sampdoria are digging in, but Inter are more talented, he needs to be the difference between a 1-1 match and a 2-1 match. He needs to be the guy who steps up and scores the goal late, because if he doesn't take that step to not just a really talented young player, but one of the best strikers in the world or one of the best young players in the world performatively, then I don't think Inter win the league. No matter how much I like this manager and how much the spine is still intact, Lautaro Martinez has to be a bona fide world-class player this year. The training gloves are off, and Inter need him to be that guy. That, combined with how much of damage control Samir can do, to me, will determine whether the league gets won this year again or not. So we'll say 1-1, but those are the two things that I'm watching either way.
For sure. What about you, Will?
Yeah, very difficult game. As you said, lots of problems to deal with in terms of team selection. But I have just predicted that Inter will win the league, and that's because I now trust them in these more difficult games, even when circumstances are not ideal. I think if you're going to be stamping your authority on a league, especially as defending champions, you need to be finding a way to get through these matches without losing your head. So I'm going to say 1-0 with Edin Dzeko scoring. I mean, it could certainly be harder than that and turn into a nasty afternoon, but given that these circumstances are not ideal, as I said. But I was very encouraged by what we saw in the first two games, particularly the comeback against Hellas, when that game seemed to be becoming very frustrating. So a narrow win. I mean, one thing, the pitch won't be a quagmire like it was in January, so that's one thing that's in our favour. So I will say 1-0, but it could be frustrating and hard fought for sure.
Absolutely, and I think we all kind of agree that this is going to be quite the difficult. This is going to be quite the difficult afternoon. Honestly, it's a difficult ground, and also given this international break and the chaos that has ensued surrounding it, and due to the tight fixture schedule that's coming up. I think this is going to hurt Inter quite a bit. But this, this is why you have a broad squad, and you have to, a deep squad, and you have to do the best. It's the same for everyone, I guess. In terms of the big teams, this is what you have to deal with. And Simone Inzaghi usually is good at rotating. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, and we also know that Gagliardini always scores against the teams from Genoa. So maybe it's time for him to do what he's paid to do. And that is to come out, start and score 2 goals against Sampdoria and Genoa, and then not do anything, please, for the next remainder of the season. Or who knows? I mean, if Simone Inzaghi can rehabilitate Roberto Gagliardini, who's a player he's been very fond of, then, good luck. And then he really
Gagliardini's like our he's like our broken clock, isn't he? He's right twice a season.
Exactly, he's right twice a season against the teams from Genoa. Right, let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football, starting with the positivity, which will be presented by Mr. Positivity, this week's Moratti, Mohamed Nassar.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult week to make positive readings for Inter when there's hasn't been a game being played over the weekend. And I say this, my Moratti of the week is the Lautaro Correa partnership. After having only seen him play once for the club, and making Correa my previous weeks or previous episodes Moratti. But then they go on and play for Argentina, and Correa scores a brace, and Lautaro assists one goal and scores a goal as well. So this partnership looks like it's a real deal. I'm very excited about them playing both together consistently, not just for club but for club and country. And let's see more of this so that we can exercise the Lula dreams of seasons past.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to get away, but I still, you keep mentioning Beppe Marotta, and I mean, what he's done this summer is probably, I mean, to keep it together in these circumstances has been, I mean, it's difficult to have a Mercato review episode and not give him the Marotta, the Moratti of the week, because he's, what a summer and what he's done, him and Ausilio, and they work really well together. And now I really just hope, please make those contract extensions official as soon as possible, because then I can relax. I won't be able to relax until Ausilio, Bacin, and Marotta have signed those contract extensions, which expire at the end of June in 2022. Right, let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. William Beckman.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Just before I give the Frog, I was obviously I don't listen to this pod much because I'm on it, but it's been interesting listening to the sort of listening to it from the other side for once, and I was very taken by the Frog intro, the commentary that we've got coming into the Frog section, and I managed to find what it was referring to. Do you know what own goal that was? The Ranocchia own, because where it goes clamoroso alto gol di Ranocchia.
I think it's Sampdoria.
No, it was at Marassi, ironically.
Yeah.
No, it was Genoa Inter in 2018 when we lost 2-0 to Ballardini's Genoa, and Skriniar cannoned the ball off Ranocchia right on the stroke of half time. So I found that out earlier because I wanted to try and find the commentary. So that's interesting. Maybe not a great omen given the stadium we're playing in next weekend. But anyway, this week's Frog is Lazio. It's quite simple. I mean, there are conflicting versions of this story. So, you have to kind of pick the one that you find the most plausible.
It is
or indeed the most
insane. It is truly
entertaining. So yeah, it's probably the best thing that's happened this summer in sport. There've been lots of high moments, lots of high quality moments over the last few months, whether it be the Olympics or the Euros or other sporting events that you've been following. I'm sure there've been lots of them, but I think the most enjoyable one was the last week of the transfer window and Lazio's failure to sign Kostic from Eintracht Frankfurt. The initial story, as it was given by the Italian media, presumably from Lazio sources, was that Frankfurt had given Lazio intentionally a wrong email address in a bid to sort of prevent a last-minute move from Kostic for Kostic going through. But it's been denied by, not officially, but sort of through the German media, and they've said that the reason Lazio didn't sign Kostic in time was because they sent their offer to the wrong email address because they missed the K in Frankfurt. I think it's the kind of thing that you'd expect from sort of non-league or sort of Sunday league transfers. But apparently it's happened at pretty much the highest level of professional football. So I think that's very frog worthy. And I think that the best summary of what happened came from Fabrizio Biasin, who basically said, we don't need to know whether it's Frankfurt's version or Lazio's version that's correct. It's just perfect as it is, this story. Just leave it there and we can enjoy it. But I think, I think the Lazio getting the letter wrong sounds slightly more credible than the giving a fake email address. We never know, but I think it's probably them. So, in the absence of certainty, I will say that it's Lazio this week's frog, because that was a player they've been following all summer. So to miss out on him for the letter K not being in the email address that they sent their offer to is farcical and very funny.
It's incredibly funny. This story is, I read something here now that Inter are really, really keen on him as well, because Perisic is leaving and Lotito missing out on Kostic to Simone Inzaghi might just put Lotito over the edge. Like, I think he just might absolutely just spontaneously self-combust after how Simone Inzaghi left him after having, went to Inter, and he's already pissed off. So yeah, no, it's quite the story, and it's really, really brilliant. Right, let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Mike Piellucci.
Yeah, so this is my first time on the show this year. I didn't get a chance, obviously, yet to address the Lukaku situation. And I think the Lukaku situation has been the storyline of this club over the summer. And my Moggi of the week is anybody, and I don't know if this is just a vocal minority. I don't know if this is necessarily prevalent, but it really just has to be said that my Moggi of the week is anybody who really actually blames Romelu Lukaku and is shunning him and wants to make him persona non grata for leaving the club. It is absolutely ludicrous. Put yourself in this situation. If you worked for a company and your ownership was unstable, you knew that this company's bosses had severe cash flow problems and you had to wait in your checks for a while. Your boss, who advocated for you and brought you into this company you trust more than anybody else, he's out the door. All around you, your coworkers, you don't know if they're going to be here anymore or they're not. The company itself might be talking about your job behind your back, maybe to other companies. And on the other hand, a top-class company wants to recruit you, pay you much more. They are performing even better, and you have sentimental value from having worked there before and feeling like you have unfinished business. What would you do? The answer for most of us in our lives is you would go to the other company. And that is in a lot of ways what happened with Romelu Lukaku and Inter and Chelsea. I get, as an Inter fan, why we are all bummed that Lukaku is not here anymore. I wanted to see him here for many more years. It sucks the way it went down. He certainly could have released a statement slightly earlier, even though I thought his statement was totally fine. But the bottom line is this guy is a legend at Inter, all right? Pure and simple. He is the biggest reason that a 10-year trophy drought ended. He is the best striker to play to put on an Inter shirt since Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And every minute he was here for 2 years, he gave everything he had to this club. If you don't think that was real, go back and watch all of his celebrations after they won the league, when he's going through the streets of Milan, just singing out the window of his car, or when he's weeping when he's about to take the trophy, when he's wearing a T-shirt of his grandparents because he finally won something for the first time in his life. He put so much into this club for every minute until he left, and that's all you can reasonably ask. This isn't Raja Nainggolan, who mailed in half the time he was here, despite being brought in for a major fee. This isn't Ibrahimovic, who I don't blame for leaving or being a mercenary whatsoever, but Ibrahimovic took shots at the club on the way out the door to Barcelona. Lukaku never did anything wrong when he was here. The situation was unsustainable in a lot of ways. The club very well might have been shopping him before Chelsea came in to swoop in anyhow. And this is someone who I do very much believe, if there was a club that meant something to him, that he had unfinished business at, in a league where he still has people stupidly doubting his abilities, I do believe Chelsea meant something to him. But it needs to stop. All right. This is a guy who we're going to turn the page. This is going to be a new club. Hopefully, we're celebrating a second title next year. But whatever happens, Lukaku should be looked at fondly. Lukaku did a ton for this club. Let's not bury him when he's out the door, and let's not do that tacky thing where anytime he doesn't score a goal at Chelsea, we all say he sucked and he'd be better off with us. It was a great run. It was too short of a run, but it was a great run. I'm going to miss him. He's a legend.
I agree with that. I think, I don't like this, that he's this, he's a mercenary, this and that or the other. I think you laid it out brilliantly. I agree with that. And also, if you read his interview he did with Belgian media just the other day, he said that Inter, saved me out of the shit. That's literally what he said. Inter, pulled me out of the shit. I was deep in the shit and Inter saved me. And he's very grateful. And he, he pretty much, said when the third offer came, I realized I couldn't, my head wasn't in it anymore. And I think that's honest.
Yeah. He's never been anything but honest the whole time he's here. To me, he should be looked at the way Mourinho was looked at. Yeah, Mourinho left the minute that Inter won the Champions League. But guess what? Who cares? He did everything he was supposed to do, and he gave everything he had to the club, and he's going to always think of the club fondly. That's all you can realistically ask for, right? Not everybody's going to be Zanetti, and that's okay. This guy, when he was here, did everything that was expected of him. He's always going to speak of the club fondly. Great. Can't wait to see him do great in England. Really.
Yeah. No, I agree. I have no issues here either. And Inter paid 60 million, 70 million, and got 115. So at the end of and he won a Scudetto for Inter as well. So you can't say anything there. No, I agree. Right, that's all we had time for. I'd like to thank you, Mo, for joining me this Sunday and not on a Monday.
What a lovely episode! Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure as always.
Reverend Mike Piellucci.
I'd like to thank you for having the show on a Sunday so I can come on the show.
Fair enough. Mr. William Beckman.
Yeah, amen to what Mike said. Good to be back up and running for a new season, and I hope everyone makes it through the next week of no club football with their sanity intact.
Yes, absolutely. And if you haven't, then please, I'm sure you will by the time you hear this, make sure to check out the madness that's going on in Brazil, between Brazil and Argentina. I think that is the frog of the century. It's insane. But until next week, take care of yourselves, your families, listen to your authorities, stay safe. Wishing you all health and to stay safe, and 3 points, and sempre e solo forza Inter.